Namaste, dear Revital. It is so wonderful to be with you this morning. It's morning time in California. It's evening time here in Portugal. And I'm so excited that you are joining my new adventure in the podcast world, the Videshee, who aims to raise awareness to foreign women who travel the world, who travel to the Far East to learn music, dance, and other performing arts related with the Eastern worlds. And so I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with me on this podcast.
Thank you, Tara. I feel in sisterhood with you on the path, and I'm delighted to be here with you.
Thank you. So, Revital, let's begin. I have many questions to ask you. And the number one question is so I don't know anything about Revital's history. So everything that I'll be sharing here today is I'm going to be learning as she answers. So that's the spontaneity factor of this podcast, is that we all get to learn together at the same time each other's story. So I'd love to learn, how was your life before Indian dance, before traveling to India? Who were you before you became a classical Indian dancer?
Wow, that's a really big question. Who was I? Let me think about it for a moment. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, of course, we're also multifaceted, and there is many things that going on that the makeup of my life journey and my life story. And I was born and raised in a kibbutz in Israel. It's a very social / almost communist community with not much spirituality to be speaking for, really. And but a lot of culture nevertheless, and a lot of nature. And so I grew up in nature. I grew up in the foothills of the Carmel Mountain in northern Israel. And I definitely grew up with a lot of exposure to music, to dance, to culture and art, mostly from a European perspective, with a little bit of Middle Eastern perspective sprinkled in there, because Israel is in the Middle East. After all. And as I grew up, slowly as a teenager, I became a little more interested in the Eastern part. I was kind of like the dial was, moving much more eastward in my fascination with the occult, with spirituality. I started to be interested in astrology when I was about 12. I started to practice mantras and yoga positions and herbology, all this kind of that whole alternative spectrum of what's there, what's hidden in the crevices of the earth, and then the feminine ways of being and of operating in this world is whispered in my ears. And long story short, I met a friend actually who went to India when I was maybe around 16 or 17. And there's something about his stories that just blasted my heart open and made me feel this strong longing to go back there for no good reason, really. So that is kind of like the pre-story of why I felt called and moved to go to India. I knew absolutely nothing about Indian dance. I have been taking dance classes pretty much all my childhood, ballet and jazz and modern, kind of the basic Western approach to dance, but not really much much more than that, actually. A little bit of belly dance, again, because I was living in Israel. We would have, belly dancers kind of coming to our dance school to enrich our curriculum. Indian dance was something that I never even heard about as a child. I went to India because I wanted to study meditation and yoga and healing arts. That was a surprise.
And so, when did you go to India? When did that finally happen? And how did you prepare yourself to go to India? Tell us a little bit about that very, very, very first journey.
I think, to be
You
honest,
can remember.
I could have, I mean, what I was going to say, I could have prepared myself better, I suppose. I was 20 and I definitely didn't, I was, invincible, and I was like, the world is my oyster, and I wasn't really preparing myself to anything. I was just kind of jumping at it. I think it's also my very kind of rambunctious personality of just like going for it. But I didn't have much money. I mean, I left the kibbutz with very little money, because you don't make money when you are growing up in a kibbutz. I got a little bit of a stipend from the kibbutz for it's like a sabbatical year. It's you take after you finish your schooling and the military service, and you go for a year to sort of discover yourself. That's very traditional, actually, in my culture of upbringing. And at first, I knew I didn't want to stay in Israel one day more than I needed to. I was so eager to leave and to explore and to experience, overseas. Overseas was sort of where the magic is in my mind. And so I actually went to California for a few months trying to make money unsuccessfully, and just enough to buy another flight ticket to Japan, where I was able to make money a little more successfully. I was there for 3 months, actually working in a club as a hostess, making good money to, when it comes to living in India, and just a couple of weeks in Thailand, and here I was in Kolkata. I mean, I got out just as quick as I could, really, in terms of having my vision was to have enough money to live in India for a few years. And so, which I didn't know anything about, but that was my vision. I landed in Calcutta, and it was immediately this ecstatic feeling of a culture shock in the best way possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, dust, the chaos, the noise, the overwhelming, sensual explosion of colors and tastes and sounds and foreign activities, and I felt at home. What was so amazing is I remember tears coming down my eyes from the ecstasy of feeling like life is fine. My life has finally begun. That was my feeling,
Oh, I had exactly the same when the first day I landed in India. Exactly the same.
Yeah. I understand. And, of course, it was a journey. I started traveling. I started as a backpacker. I went to Goa for a couple of weeks. It was not my thing. I moved around, traveled all over India. After a few months in Varanasi, in Rajasthan, and all the kind of touristic places, I ended up on a trip to the Kumbh Mela, actually. And I just heard about it. Again, it was one of the things I heard about it, and off I go on a train down south from Delhi, and threw myself into it. Ended up living with some sadhus in their tent, kind of getting initiated into the sadhus life, the holy men of India. just total, hippie attitude.
Yeah.
um, Going up to the Himalayas, staying in caves, living off the land, kind of, more or less. This was my deep initiation into India,
India.
into yoga, into meditation, into healing arts.
Mm. And so from that journey, how did you get to the arts, the Southern arts, the dance?
Yeah, it's a very long and twisted journey. But the arts, as I said, I grew up with a love of dance and music and arts and culture, and going to museums and to shows and to classical ballet shows and all of that, and theater. And I met two gentlemen actually from France in the ashram I was staying and studying yoga. And they told me, one of them, his wife, was studying down south. I was at that point, I was in Himalayas studying yoga, and his wife was studying Kathakali in Kalamandalam, which is the most famous school, I believe, for Kathakali in Kerala. And he was saying that his daughter was studying Bharatanatyam. And he was telling me about it. And I was like, like again, this feeling like this is my next gateways, And I was like, all of a sudden I was jumping in the bed to finish my yoga course so I can take the train down south. And I did. He made a phone call for his wife. She helped me settle in. I started Bharatanatyam classes in this completely foreign place again, a village in the south. I was living in a house where I had to get the water with a rope from the well for washing my clothes, for anything, for cooking my food, making a fire every time I needed to make food. Pulling the water every time I had to take a shower, a bath, walking half an hour to get food, to get basic ingredients for my dance class. Those French people, after a couple of weeks, they left. And I was all by myself. Nobody was really speaking English, other than my teacher was a little bit. But the villagers where I was living, it was very, I felt very isolated, to be honest, and very focused. I was just practicing meditation, yoga, dance, cooking, washing, meditation, yoga, dance, cooking, washing, a little bit of reading. I had like a stack of books. That's all I did. Sleeping, of course. No internet. I mean, this is pre-internet. No computer, no phone, nothing like that. No connection with the outside world whatsoever. For a couple months, I was doing that. I would go every weekend to watch these long epic nights of Kathakali in all different counties in the region. It was deep. It was profound. It was conditioning me, and kind of breaking my conditioning and my resistance, and getting me in that space of taking in the complexity of Indian dance. The philosophy and the physicality and the emotionality and the spirituality, all of that was in there. But I didn't stick with it. I was craving some connection with people I can speak with, and with more of a community that I felt connected with. I went to the beach for a few days, to take a break, and I basically never came back. I continue in my journey. This and that and all sort of other things happened. I ended up in Varanasi. I studied Kathak for about 6 months.
Okay.
Went back to Israel, did connected with my friends who had alternative theater group, did some projects with dance with them. Fast forward.
Odissi, how did that get?
Some friends of mine from Mexico. At some point in my journey, I spent 6 months in Mexico as well. And I made strong bonds with some people there. And a couple of them were now in Odisha. They invited myself and some other of my friends from around the world to do a deep retreat, healing retreat in the countryside, in the jungle. It's kind of in a peninsula, actually, between the ocean and the Chilka Lake. A 2-week healing retreat. And in that retreat, I got exposed to my friend who was studying Odissi. She got a scholarship from the embassy through the connection with Mexico and India to study a year-long course of Odissi in Bhubaneswar. Her husband was studying the Pakawaj. And I just saw how she was moving her torso, and I was like, that's interesting. I started to pick her brain. And as soon as we came back to the city from the healing retreat in the jungle, she took me to Ragurajpur, which is the birthplace of Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra. And it was a full moon. It was one of the holidays, as you know, in India, the Indian calendar is organized around the moon. And most of the Indian holidays begin in either new moon or full moon. So it's kind of, overlap of the pagan holidays of celebrating the lunar cycles. And so it was a full moon. I don't know if it was, I probably could make sense of which holiday it was if I think about it for a moment in terms of the time of the year, but it's irrelevant. What's relevant is that they were performing Odissi on the old stage of the Devi temple in Ragurajpur. And those and all these like balls of Mangalacharan, of Bhumi Pranam and Sava Pranam embedded in my head. I was like, wow, it felt like this yantra, tantra, a scheme is somehow embedded in my body and in my head. The movement, the balls, it all made so much sense in a very illogical way. And that I knew I fell in love. It penetrated me in a way like nothing ever did. And
then you began to study Odissi. When did you decide to, okay, I'm going to study Odissi, I'm going to be in Orissa, and how did it take you to your very, very first teacher, that experience to your first teacher?
Yeah, and so my first teacher was the late Guru Gangadhar Pradhan, and he is the founder of Odissi Dance Academy, which is a big school in Bhubaneswar, who is now run by Aruna Mohanty for many years already. And he had a satellite school in his farm where his family was in Konarak, Natya Mandap. It's Natya is a dance theater and Mandap is a hall. So it was a dance school very close to the Konarak Sun Temple in the village. And I went there because I was still very much a hippie girl who could not conceive of living in a, cement city. Kind of that world of city life was very foreign to me. I grew up in a village and I couldn't conceive of that city life. So I asked my friend, is there anything anywhere? Like I was like conflicted because I was like, I want to study this dance form, but I cannot live in the city. It's like a wild animal in a cage. So she said, oh yeah, they have this school in Kanawak. And so I went there and, so to speak, knocked on the gate. Obviously, there was no door. Stood in the gate, contemplating, shall I step, over the threshold and enter this world for a moment. Then I took that step and looked for whoever is in charge. Said, here I am. I want to study Odissi. Will you take me? And they were a little bit confused because I was actually one of the very first foreigners who made it into that particular satellite of the school. It was not the Gotipur school. It was where we were training the young boys from a young age. They, massage them and they help them do all this bandhas, all this extreme yogic bending, and teaching them music and teaching them dance, teaching them everything all day.
It's like a gurukul. Right?
It's a gurukul. It's a gurukul, mostly for young boys, but they were also opening it to the young girls in the adjunct villages to come studying Odissi. And Guru Gangadhar Pradhan would come every so often to teach Odissi. And once I was there, it was coming more often and teaching me. It was actually, at first it was late winter, early spring, but then in the summertime, they had summer break from the city, from the school in the city. And so the guru lives in his home, and that's where I got his attention. And I mean, what can I tell you, Tara? I do remember so vividly my first class. I literally almost crawled out of the classroom because I was so exhausted. I was a puddle of sweat. And every muscle in my body I didn't even know exist was fatigue. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm definitely coming back, kind of a thing. I mean, it was so hard, but also so fascinating.
Yeah.
And as you know, it gets easier. It doesn't get easy, but it gets easier. It gets doable.
And how was it in that time in India? How did the Orissan community accept you as a single white woman out of nowhere, learning Odissi? I'm sure there's hardly, or maybe very less people who could even speak English. So how was how was the reception of you being there, learning this dance in such very tribal, closed, I mean, it is a very closed community setting, so, and and in general, just being in Orissa as a foreign woman, it has never been easy. Now it's easier these days, but I mean, back in the day it wasn't, and especially you were way there earlier than me. So how were your first experiences? And
it's a lot of navigation. It's kind of a mixed bag. Of course, for me, I was already a couple of years into living in India by the time I arrived in Odisha. And so I already knew to dress properly. I was already kind of very Indianized in a sense. I was very comfortable in the sari. I was very comfortable in the Indian, clothing and ornamentation. So I was blending in a little bit, and that was definitely helpful. And I do think that when we go as foreigners to India, it's this navigation game. It's this treading a fine line of having respect to the culture by taking in some of the customs, and also staying in alignment with our truth, with our integrity, you know. And so it was always this kind of back and forth, also in the relationship that the treatment that I received. In one hand, there was a lot of fascination. I mean, I must say, I, generally speaking, was always treated with a lot of care and kindness and interest and support. And I mean, it was absolutely a joy for them, from my perspective, to teach me. You know, they were very proud of their culture and very eager to share it with a foreigner, and very, but also kind of trying to weigh me out and to gauge how serious I am, why am I interested in the culture, what is my angle, what am I trying to do here, can I study Odissi dance? This kind of, you know, they've had a lot of question marks, and it was a relationship that was building over time. The more I gave, the more my teachers gave, and you know, it's back and forth. It's definitely a relationship. I think that for me, because I also came from the world of yoga, and I already knew a lot of chants. And of course, I was learning a little bit Oriya, and I knew a little bit of Hindi. There was an understanding that I am interested in the cultural experience, in the depth of the culture, in the history, in the spiritual aspect. There was some kind of exchange. I was also teaching yoga to the Gotipuas, and I was kind of sharing whatever I know about healing arts. I definitely had a line out my bedroom door for, you know, treating people for headache and stomachache and whatever they got, you know. And so it felt like I'm part of the family, you know. I was interested in the food and learning how to cook, you know, asking questions, and then just sharing. Yeah.
And tell me, how did the dance empower you? I'd love to understand like the inner transformation journey that this dance enables a person who then fully dedicates themselves to the sadhana, the practice. I'd love to understand the internal, I mean, the physical, we know you get strong, but I'd love for you to share the internal transformation that the dance gave you then and still gives you now. So share a little bit of that about that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, absolutely. I didn't understand in my head right away how much of a yoga practice this dance is, Odissi dance. It was more of an intuitive and a somatic experience that made me stick with it. However, I did drop off the Odissi wagon after my initial year or so of working with it. I met a man, I fell in love, I got pregnant, I had a child, and I raised my child for our first couple years in India, but it was way up in the Himalayas, was very much removed from Odissi, but I continued with yoga. It was when I injured myself, and then a couple of years later, after I had my daughter, I moved to California, to Santa Cruz County, Northern California. And I injured myself with practicing yoga. It's a combination of a very rigorous practice and recovering still from having a young child. And in my recovery journey is where I discovered Odissi again. I met a colleague who had studied with my same guru, who was in Santa Cruz. Her name is Shalini Patnaik, and she is such a bright sun of a woman. She is a little younger than me, actually. She is from Oriya family she was raised in San Diego, and she was raised with dance, and she started to teach me again. And that sparked, speaking of the inner transformation, I realized first that although I cannot really practice vinyasa yoga, all these back and forth sun salutations was breaking my back, I could study dance. I could dance. And that spiralic energy. So what I discovered the yoga through dance and the yoga of dance through understanding, tuning in. Here I was much more sensitive to the inner energetic movements that the dance sparks and creates my body. And I found that energy of the spiral was awakening all of my chakras, connecting my pelvis to my heart, waking up my spiritual centers, harmonizing my emotional content, my internal organs and their various emotional houses were speaking to one another through the movement of dance. The stamping, the vibration of the footwork was waking up all the cells in my body and rejuvenating them and restoring my health, restoring my energy, restoring my joy, and restoring connection to the divine. And so to this day, I find that naturally so I go to waves where I dance more and when I dance less. And when I dance less, after a kind of a dry period, when I go back to dance, again and again, I'm reminded of how powerful this art form is, this practice is in making me feel connected to life, making me feel connected to nature, to the mountains, to the trees, to the earth beneath my feet, to the spirit beings, that whisper in my ears all these wisdom teachings that come from thousands of years back and go thousands of years forward. Wow. It's such a profound practice. I need to give you a chance to ask more questions, because the transformation aspect of this dance form is the jewel crown, is the gem that keeps me going.
And so when did you decide to take it on, after the pregnancy, after the daughter? You got into it as a healing, it was healing your process, and then you decided, okay, I'm going to take this seriously, it's going to become my life. And so when did you make that shift to okay, I want to teach the dance, because the dance has become a huge integral part of who you are right now in the last few years? So that shift of okay, I'm going to make this something really serious, and when did you start teaching in the US, and so that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that where there is a will, there is a way. And when one is clear about what one must do, the doorway is open, the path reveals itself, so to speak. And it so happened in my life, I was actually divorcing at the time, where I was rediscovering the dance. My daughter was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was starting a new relationship with another man, and through that transition of relationship, there was an opportunity for me to go back to India. And so I did. I went back straight to Odisha with my new relationship, my fiance at the time, and he was a yogi. He is a yogi, and I'm a yogini. And we went back to Konarak Natya Mandap. And at that point, it felt much more mature, much more complete, much more real, especially in the constellation of a relationship with a man who was also studying yoga, tantra, yoga with a yogi in the dunes, a couple kilometers away, or 5 kilometers away or so from Konawak. And we had a parallel journey of stepping into this tantric spiritual culture of Odisha through dance, through yoga, through meditation, through art and practice. And
Wow, that
yeah,
sounds like so divine.
yes, and we ended up getting married there. Actually, his guru was conducting a marriage ceremony, full-on Indian marriage ceremony. We later got married in the US as well with all of our families, but that was our first marriage. And it's not that I can say that I knew I'm going to start a school and a performance group. Who even thought about that? I was just dedicated to the practice as my embodiment, my journey. I was owning it as my yoga practice, my journey. And I remember, we traveled a little bit after we left Odisha. We went to Varanasi and to Rishikesh and a little bit up the mountains. And I was adamant, I was so dedicated that I have to practice it every day because, there's a lot of memorization of ball, of dance sequences, of movement patterns that if you don't practice, initially, in the beginning, it's so important to practice very regularly in order for it to get deeply embedded in your body. It's a somatic memory. It's, for the most part, an oral and physical tradition. It's not something that is written in books, and you cannot really learn dance from books. We now have a lot of help with, the online YouTube video exchange and sharing world, but back then it didn't exist. It has both the good and the bad in it, because sometimes we use those videos as crutches, and it's a little hard for us to win ourselves away from them. But regardless, nevertheless, I didn't have it back then. So the practice, I think, also, practicing it so much, so many hours every day. When I came back to the US, I continued with that, and I had not that much money at that point, and not enough money to rent a studio space. So I would practice in the parks, I would practice in public spaces wherever I could find a cement slab. That was my practice room. And people saw me, and people were curious. It was like a really good way to create an instant community. People wanted to know more about it and to learn. And so when I came back to the States, people were asking me, can you teach here? Can you teach there? And I started to teach. It was sort of the demand that made me want to teach. And I get a lot of ideas and knowingness from walking. And I would walk in the forest to my dance class, or to places where I would practice, and a lot of the ideas of where to teach and how to teach and who to teach and how to call things. It came to me in my walks in the forest. I was like, Shakti Bhakti. I remember it came from me in a walk, and how to create it. The creation of it was sort of coming step by step, and by the demand of my students. The first few students, they wanted to perform. They were ready to perform. And I was like, okay, let's let's make a performance. And I had no history in production. I knew nothing about stage lighting and then staging and then selling tickets and marketing a show. But I learned
Along the way.
along the way. Still
Along the
learning.
way. Still
Still
learning.
a lot along the way.
And so Shakti Bhakti, which is your brand, your school, your company, was born, and it's very successful. I know you have very devoted students that continue with you along all these years, and students that even travel with you to India, because I know you host retreats in India, in Odisha, with your students, and do a lot of amazing programs and shootings. And it's very inspiring how you've been able to bring a bit of Santa Cruz to Odisha and vice versa. So I'd like to know where you're at right now with Shakti Bhakti, and with this pandemic brought so many transformations for all of us. And me, for myself, I was living in India. Now I'm back in Portugal for some time. I don't know how long, but I'm here now. So where are you at right now with Shakti Bhakti and Odissi and this whole, transformation?
Yeah, very, very good, big question. Absolutely. The pandemic turned me upside down several times. Still turning upside down at the moment. I'm rolling. At this point, as we recording this interview in October 2021, I am somewhat of a gypsy. I actually left Santa Cruz County. I've moved a lot of my work to online, Shakti Bhakti online. I've spent the beginning of the pandemic recording a lot of videos and getting a lot of different courses of the basics of Odissi, Chukas, Tribangis, Charis, Brahmaris, Padaveda, Mudras, you name it, all the basics, as well as some mini choreographies, as well as movement medicine, which is in every class I teach. One of the things that I felt very passionate, I still feel passionate about, is bridging East and West and approaching this ancient art form from the perspective of here and now, without turning my back to the past, honoring, respecting, and guided by the history of Odissi, always looking for more, clues and hints and gems from the past, and also being very level-headed about where we're going and where we're standing, and marrying those different timelines, and teaching Western students, and at this point Western East is so well blended. We live in global world. I can no longer say that people in India necessarily have that much more accessibility to the history and culture of India than Western people. Even just the world is moving so fast. Even in the last few years, in the last 5 years, it has changed so much. So long story
and even more so with the pandemic, we can learn so many things online now with so many respected gurus of India are teaching online like never before, and we can learn everything that we wish to learn from the comfort of our house right now. We don't even need to go to India. So that has been, like before you would have to go to the guru's house, stay with them and learn from them. And now we can do everything on Zoom. So that has been the major shift in the Indian arts. It's huge, humongous.
Yeah, absolutely. And for someone like myself who lives in the West, who has, the economy of the West, I cannot teach. So some of people who have studied with me in the past online also, because I have been teaching online a little bit even before the pandemic. Now they can teach from very well respected gurus in India online, like you said, for a lot cheaper, because the economy in India is also cheaper. And I encourage them to do so. And I freely give, you know, the contacts of all of my teachers to my students, because my truth is that there is abundance and there is place for everybody to share their knowledge, to share their art, to share their wisdom. And for me, my wisdom is in combining, you know, the Odissi dance art form and movement form teachings with also yogic and modern kind of functional movement, Taoist cultivation, everything that I have developed, the healing arts and the self-care practices that I have developed. I combine it with the art of Odissi when I teach. So that's kind of, we ask where I'm heading. I'm really heading into teaching more than just Odissi, more than just Shakti Bhakti, more than just my little group in Santa Cruz and in the Bay Area. I'm looking into creating workshops, events, retreats, performances, and classes that are combining different sensibilities and needs of the modern temple dancer, you know, the mature Odissi dancer too. You know, people are getting older and they still want to dance, but maybe they're not focused in performance. They prefer focusing it as a spiritual practice. And people who do want to perform, but they need to take care of their body in a different way. They need to develop their body, develop their canvas, so to speak, to hold the dance in a more graceful way as they age, or as they dealing with modern day stressors and needs. So that's where I'm heading, and you know, I don't know exactly what it looks like. It's forming as we speak. The online school is alive and kicking, but I must say that I much prefer the transmission of in person. There's something happens in the room. The energy exchange, that power that comes from the one-on-one with the one person and the one-on-one with a circle, with a group, that kind of ascension of you know, the culmination of all of our passions, all of our yearning, all of our collective wisdom, our collective roots. You know, I learn so much from my students. I learn just as much as I learn from my teachers, from my students, if not even more. And so I miss that, and I'm building that in different places as I travel now, going to spend some time in Europe as well. So let's see. Yeah.
And in the meantime, I would love to mention about, I mean, my favorite book that you published, which is the Mudras of Yoga and Indian Dance, right?
So yeah, I actually have them here.
I mean, I think that, I mean, whoever is into yoga and dance, this is like the Bible that you should have in your library, because it is the most thorough study you will find in the market on the art of mudras. So, and the meaning of mudras. So please share about this book, because I think everyone should have a copy, or at least two, I think.
Thank you. Well, Mudras of India is, like you said, is a comprehensive book of pretty much all of the mudras that we can discover. I mean, it's not all. It's never all. I mean, anybody who's been to India, you know, it's infinite. There is no. It's not possible to compile all of the mudras, because there's so many lineages and sub lineages and sub lineages. It's vast web of wisdom that is transversing to time and to land. But this book nevertheless compiles a lot of yoga and dance mudras in a encyclopedic alphabetic order. So it's kind of a baseline. It's pretty scholarly, and it also has information about how to practice and what is the origin and what is the purpose of each mudra. There's also the card deck, so we divided, and it's a little more concise. It's not as expensive, but it's very fun. It's the mudras of yoga, and it's yogic mudras for healing and spiritual cultivation. And it has some information, a booklet, how to use them. And then the mudras of dance, which is only the 52 basic hand mudras of dance that we learn when we learn, part of our basic curriculum, when we learn most South Indian dances anyway, has the same mudras. Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Odissi, although most of them are used also in Mohiniyattam, Kathak, all the classical forms of Indian dance. And it also has a booklet about how to use it. It's more of a fun kind of product, but it's very good also as a study tool.
To study. And I know the Mudras of India book, you've translated it into Spanish, right?
So we didn't, but somebody did. Yeah,
there's a Spanish translation, right?
Yes, there is a Spanish translation. We had no idea about it. We received in the mail one day 5 copies of Mudra de la India in Espanol. And we were like, what's that? Nobody even told us. They just sent us the books, but it was translated through the publisher. I mean, we didn't publish the book. We don't own it. We it's sold by Jessica Kingsley publisher, Singing Dragon. It's a UK-based publisher, and they
translated it. So you can buy these books through your website or any other places? How do you have access to the books?
Not to our website. No, we don't sell them. You can buy them through the publisher, through Amazon, and to any mainstream book outlet. And you can order it to your local bookstore. You can go to your local bookstore and say, hey, I want you to order Mudras of India for me, and they will.
Okay. Yeah. So what is it that I would love to ask you, being on the yogini, sacred dance path, and also creative, holistic path, what would be your message to anyone who is venturing into this path, just starting, or someone who is needing a word of inspiration, encouragement? Like, share with us some words of wisdom, something that you would tell your students, who are starting or in the process. What would be your words of wisdom for anyone who is, traveling to the East now that, the borders are open? So I guess there are 2 advices that I'm asking you for here right now. Like, number 1 would be like, what advice or like what word of wisdom would you give to anyone who's wanting to study these arts? And what would be your word of wisdom to someone who wishes to go to the Far East to study these arts and make them part of their life, as a mature, seasoned dancer and teacher and artist, practitioner? What would be your words of wisdom?
Yes.
You can take a breather, think for 30 seconds.
No, there's a lot to say, but I would say first thing first is trust yourself. Trust your inner wisdom. Trust your intuition. If you have that spark, if you have that passion, if you have that longing, that is precious. This is your most precious gem, your passion. Trust it. one step at a time. Find good company, surround yourself with people who support you with who you are, support you in your passion, encourage you. If you have friends or family or are downers, distance yourself a little bit from those people who put you down and find that community, because Sangha, community of people who believe in you, who see your highest potential, see your light, see your wisdom, see your strength and your beauty, that is priceless. This is very powerful. Then the other thing is take time on a regular basis to tune out of, digital impressions, digital media, because there's so much out there. And when we compare ourselves to others, when we spend too much time sort of researching, examining what's out there, it can be so overwhelming to our nervous system. And that in and of itself can take us into a downward spiral spin. So detach yourself, disconnect yourself from, social media in particular, but digital media in general, on a regular basis. Every day, take time to sit with yourself, to move with yourself, to be with yourself, and to tune in to your power, because each and every one of us has infinite amount of creative energy, infinite amount of creative potential. We are, each and every one of us is the queen of our kingdom, and we are ever powerful to manifest our wildest dreams. I truly believe in it. We have to believe in ourselves, we have to trust ourselves, and we have to walk the path. We have to take the steps, one step at a time. And we'll get there. This is my words of wisdom. And many more.
Yeah, so if people want to study with you, they can connect with you right now through your online school, shaktibhaktionline.com, right? That's your online school.
Absolutely.
And you will be in Europe, so you'll be close to me. You should come visit me in Portugal.
Yes,
have you ever been to Portugal?
No.
Oh, it's super happening here.
Yes. And I want to say I am right now, because I'm not anchored in one place, I'm more open than ever to going places, if the opportunity arises. So anyone can contact me, Revital at shaktibhakti.com. Through my website, I'm sure you can find my email. Social media, I'm out there a little bit, not all the time, but I'm there. And let's connect. Let's stay connected, I should say.
Wonderful. Revital, thank you so much. It's been really wonderful to speak with you today and to feel your radiance and words of wisdom, to understand your story and how Odissi still inspires you so much today. And and I hope to meet you soon here in Europe. There seems to be quite a collective of Odissi dancers here in Europe right now, and so it's inspiring. So thank you
so much, Tara.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I really pray for you, for your life, for your daughter, and blessings all the way. And may we continue to inspire sacred sisterhood through the art of dance practice, devotion, sacred dance. And I hope this, interview with Revital and this podcast can continue to inspire and motivate anyone who is interested in learning Eastern arts and most importantly, raise awareness, around women like us who dedicate our lives to this very singular path, very unique path in life. So thank you all for tuning in, and I see you soon for our next podcast. That will be, I launch this podcast once a month, so I will see you next month. Bye. Thank you. Bye.